Hello everybody, it's me, Kalo. Welcome to another episode of KaloTV. Today we have a whimsical and peculiar game for those who like fast-paced action, explosions, as well as committing acts of extreme violence against robots while jumping around. Though I must ask, can you handle the crowd? Gobsmacked is a roguelite first-person shooter where you play as a goblin gladiator, and your objective is to make it to the major leagues, El Coliseo. But to get there, you have to prove yourself through different levels. When you enter the arena, the spotlights are on you. Destroy all the robots, blow up balloons, and try to appeal to your public by completing secondary missions through your performance for extra gold. But you must be quick, or else the crowd will die down. And trust me, you really don't want that. I mean, you won't perish if the crowd is bored, but it is kind of awkward. Anyway, in between levels, you can use the gold at the arena shop to invest in ammo, healing, and other items to assist you in your odyssey. Or you could save some of it, send it home, invest wisely. Or you can get that extra bomb. I'm sure you're gonna need it for later, and not forget about using it like I do. I gotta say that the gameplay is very entertaining and challenging. You can climb, wall jump, interact with your environment, grab a robot to use as a gun, throw them around, you name it. With each level you beat, things will get more complicated as new, tougher robots join the show, along with traps and obstacles. Go ballistic dodging the shots, climbing towers, and shooting them up with slow motion effects. It's crazy, I love it! Also, when you start a run, you can choose a tool to bring with you into the arena. So, the more money you have at home to unlock this, the better. The demo is available on Steam for free, so please give it a look sometime and join the Goblin Mania. But now, you know what time it is. This is the part of the video in which we approach the indie devs of the day, Ash and Adam's Games, to ask them some questions about Gobsmacked. So here we go! Quick note here, the next segment is going to be quite long, since Adam and Ash went very in depth with their experience. So, if you want to make a pause to grab a drink or get comfy, this is the right moment. What can you guys tell us about yourselves? What's the story behind Ash and Adam's Games?
I've been making games for a long time. Since 2004, I've been making games professionally, and I was dabbling with like mods and stuff really for about 6 or 7 years before that. So games, I've spent a huge chunk of my life making games. A lot of that time I worked as a freelancer, and really for the last 10 years I was the main guy at a small visual design in our production studio called Chickadee that catered to the indie games community. I've actually spent like 99% of my career working in small games and in indie games too. Ash and I met on a project. I was contracted as the art director and he was contracted as the lead programmer. And that project turned out good. It was sort of a really hard project. And while we were working on it, while we were getting close actually to finishing it up, I had said to Ash, hey, you know, when we're done with this, I'm thinking I might take a little time and just like jam on some stuff, and if you want to jam on some stuff together, that would be awesome, because we got along like right away. We got along famously. We realized that we shared design sensibilities. We knew how to work with one another. Like if there was some problem to solve, like let's say, actually just to use an actual example, you know, the game that we were working on at the time had a procedural terrain system, and I said like, here's how and it was tile based. It wasn't just like open. It wasn't like an open landscape or anything. It was all tile based. And I said, here's the art style, here's how I want to, here's the tooling that I think I need, you know, what do you think about all this? And he would look at, you know, my designs and say, okay, this makes a ton of sense. And like the next day, he would have something for me, which was like a super fast turnaround. Ash is an incredibly fast programmer. So we got along great on a personal level, we got along great on a work level, and we shared like the types of games that we wanted to make. Just by chit-chatting, we realized, oh, we share design sensibilities. And that's really where our collaboration started, and where Ash and Adam's game started. Ash had a little bit to say about this, so I'll let his audio play here.
Yeah, and that's a good jumping point for. I think when we started on this particular prototype, we were pretty explicit about the goal being like, hey, we want to play something, we want to make something that we enjoy playing for like 15 to 20 minutes at a time. Like that was the outset. And I think because of like it was a pretty tight timeline on the Desktop Dungeons project. And so I think we were both like not thinking, oh, let's make a game and like put it on Steam and, you know, found a studio around it. I think we were both just like, hey, we enjoy working with each other. Let's make something small and see what happens. And you know, the story behind Ash and Adam's games as like a studio / company thing is very secondary to like, we happen to be working together, and in order to put something on Steam, it's a little bit easier if you have like a formal company around it. Like that's why Ash and Adam's games exists. And we've tried to be as and we've tried to be as transparent as possible with that. Like it's literally just called Ash and Adam's Games. It's not trying to be a studio or anything. It really is like a collaboration, like what is it? Formality.
Have you worked in anything similar before? I understand this is the studio's first game, but I wonder if you've participated in any game jam in the past or anything similar.
I have worked on dozens and dozens and dozens of games over my career. I've worked on first-person games, I've worked on shooters, I've worked on action games, and then a bunch of other just genres, you know, that are not even related, aren't closely related to any of that stuff. But I've never worked on anything quite like Gobsmacked. Gobsmacked is a project that the level of like obnoxiousness in Gobsmacked very much aligns with my own sensibilities. I like things that aren't trying to be... I like high-minded stuff. I like high art. But I also really like stuff that is not... that's purposely not trying to be high-minded. I one time left a studio that I was working with because I said, you know, this studio has very highbrow sensibilities, and if I'm being honest, I cap out at midbrow, but really like low mid is where I live. So you know, that coupled with you know, when I was in high school, I was in punk bands and metal bands and stuff like that, and just the whole like loud, obnoxious attitude and visual sense, like show posters and stuff like that. Just that like loud, obnoxious stuff, I think is just really fun. And when I'm working on someone else's game, you know, I'm not trying to introduce that stuff because I think it's cool. I listen to the designer and I try to make what they're actually asking for. I never want to make my version of what they're asking for. So to be able to work on Gobsmacked is a real treat. Ash actually has worked on something like Gobsmacked, because Gobsmacked is based directly on a prototype that he did. Actually, it's sort of based on two prototypes. There was the main prototype, which was this game called Welcome Archer, which had a lot of the same stuff in as we have in Gobsmacked. It was round-based, It was a roguelite, so you killed little robots in an arena, and then you got gold, and you spent that gold on upgrades. So a lot of like the mechanical DNA was in Welcome Archer, but then there was also another prototype that he did that was also like a first-person action game, but you played as a honey badger, and it was way goofier. And to some degree, I think it's Gobsmacked is the starting point anyway, is really a mix of those two games. So Ash had something to say about this as well, and then this is actually where I realized I wasn't recording, so the rest of it will have both of us talking.
Man, Archer kind of started, there's like a whole lineage, because obviously when you're working on this stuff and playing a bunch of games, like everything infuses everything else. But Archer kind of started after playing this game called, I guess it's pronounced Snake RX or SNKRX. It's a tiny little roguelite game, and I don't play many, well, at that point I hadn't played many like arena-based roguelites, but one cool thing I liked in there was that if you get certain upgrades in the shop that are of similar types, you would kind of unlock the bonuses of a given class. And you could always re-roll the shop. So it wasn't like other roguelites where it's like, oh, you have 3 upgrade options. It was like, oh, you can constantly pay to keep seeing more options and make your build crazier, faster. And I wanted to try what that felt like in a first-person setting, and I had somewhere along the lines like made a little first-person controller that had a bow, and I figured like, oh cool, that's the perfect thing. I'll take the bow, and the upgrades like affect the bow, and like the amount of projectiles the bow shoots, and whether they have explosions or not, and whether they bounce or not. And that was kind of the birth of Archer. And then, as typical with these things, like while jamming, it kind of started making itself, like the little arenas and the robots, and that was kind of the basis for Archer, which ultimately became the basis for Gobsmacked.
What are your inspirations for Gobsmacked, both visually and gameplay-wise?
Visually, the inspirations for Gobsmacked, they're oh, well, I said this when I wasn't recording, so I'll make sure that I say this again. Given that my history, my work history, my professional history has been mostly making other people's games, with the art, if I'm coming up with an art style for someone, for someone else's games, I don't try to make it what I think their game should look like. I try to listen to what they're talking about and what they want, and I try to make the best looking version of their game. And so but over the last few years, certainly on Desktop Dungeons and on Battle Bands, which was another game that I did that was before DDR, something was sort of trying to come out. I think some personal expression was trying to come out. I've worked with studios that have like very highbrow visual sensibilities. In fact, I left this one time when I stopped working with the studio that I was sort of just on a perpetual contract with. I said this studio has very highbrow sensibilities, but if I'm being honest, I max out at about midbrow, and low mid is really where I live, I think. So there was always something that was like wanting to come out really for like before we started collaborating. I would say like maybe 5 years before that, there was something that I felt a need to express, I think. And Gobsmacked is very much, I think, the result. How it looks is very much a result of that. Even honestly, even design sensibilities, like it's all wrapped up, right? Like I think we both view games very holistically.
Extremely high quality midbrow sensibilities, and
yeah. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my work. Thank you. It's like the Gobsmacked has I would say some very interesting themes, and that's like part of the thing that we're like you know, as we approach the end of development, that's one of the things that we're really trying to, you know, figure out is how are we going to express these themes, especially after the change of like taking out the stars. But you know, Gobsmacked is very much a like pick up and play. Like you look at it and you're like, oh, I get it. Right? You don't have to. We have a tutorial because there is some sort of there's some like traversal mechanics that are not totally unique, but they're not commonplace, and we have to teach those.
Yeah.
But you can watch someone play Gobsmacked and be like, oh, I get it. And I think like the thing that I always try to do with art, and this is actually true even with like other people's art styles, is I want a good 5-second read. I want you to be able to like look at a screenshot and be like, oh, I get it. Right. So you know, I think when I was younger, I was in punk bands and metal bands and stuff like that, and I've always been drawn to things that are obnoxious in a fun way, that don't take themselves seriously. You know, Gobsmacked is definitely not a game that takes itself seriously. It's very much like, hey, let's have a big, dumb, fun, loud time. Right? So,
man, I'd never thought of that connection, but yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, it's. I'm excited because for me personally, Gobsmacked is very much tied with that. That thing that was trying to get out, that thing that I was trying to express for like the last 5 years. I'm really curious what the next, like whatever it is, whatever our next game is. You know, now that I've expressed that thing, what am I going to be drawing from? I honestly don't know. It's exciting.
Same. I'm equally excited. And equally big question mark about what exactly it is. I mean, one thing that's worth talking about is also because the question is, what are the inspirations? There were some other things that we had played that kind of led into the inspirations of it. One that's in my head is this game called Armored Head, which is... I initially found Armored Head because it was on a site called Steam 250, which is like hidden Steam games. They haven't sold hidden gem Steam games. They haven't sold a lot, but they have some amount of reviews, and they're like reviewed really highly. And this game was like, I don't know, relatively cheap. It was like under $10, and I mean, it takes like 2 hours to complete the whole game. It's a first-person arena game. You get exposed to like a bunch of kind of quirky enemies, and you play as this kind of like robotic thing, and it has this really interesting ending, which I won't spoil, but it's somewhat like different from the rest of the game, but still very much tied into the rest of the game. And it's just a cool like 2 hour good like short experience. It takes you through something, you get some closure, and you feel good about the thing the whole time. So that was part of it. Like for me, the thesis of like making a short, like juicy, interesting game that you don't feel bad putting away after a couple of hours. Like you've had a good time and you've got closure in the space of a couple of hours. Like that's a massive win on, in my view. And then something else that we were playing. I think Adam had recommended this, and we were kind of playing it at the same time. At the very beginning of making Gobsmacked was a game called Heroes of Hammerwatch. And
oh my goodness,
there you have this like, you have these little heroes, and you kind of start in a town, and you end up doing these like rogue-lite runs through different dungeons. And it's just a really cool sense of like exploration in that, and seeing what the next little arena or dungeon would be like. And I think that also fed into, some of the design of Gobsmacked.
Yeah, Armored Head was huge. I totally forgot that we were doing so much Hammerwatch. Hammerwatch is, what was the arcade game? I mean, like, it's obviously Heroes of Hammerwatch is obviously a roguelite. But what, with the wizard and the warrior, and it's like a 4-player top-down gauntlet.
Oh.
Right? So it's like it's also sort of a gauntlet.
Yeah.
But, yeah, such a man. I need to go back and replay that. That's such a good game. I feel like also it's all to some degree. Gobsmacked is sort of tied up in just the like retro shooter revival, right? It's not. It doesn't look like pixely. It's not trying to be go through linear levels and it's sci-fi or it's medieval or whatever. Like it has its own setting and it has its own vibe, but in terms of design sensibilities, I think it's somewhat tied up in that. It's got retro design sensibilities to some degree, which is nice. You can like play it and there are parts. This is just me complimenting our game. I don't know. It feels very incorrect, but you can, as an experience, some parts of it feel familiar and some parts of it feel fresh. And for me, I'm really proud of that it's, if you want that retro experience, I think you'll find something. But if you want something a little fresh, you'll find something too.
Yeah, I'm equally proud of that part of it. That's cool.
How do you come up with the concept for the game?
I think once we decided, we're going to use this Welcome Archer game as a base, we started thinking of like what aspects would we like to explore, like design-wise. And you had found this really cool video essay on playing a goblin in a game.
Oh yeah.
And how that evokes or could ideally evoke. No, wait. It was one of the criteria I think in that video essay was how he who
Yeah,
is this?
I just showed this to my students. I can't remember why. So it was a video on Polygon, and we can send you a link. It's it's like 20 minutes. It's a really funny video, where they ranked a bunch of games where you play as goblins, and they had this metric, these various criteria of like how nasty are you, like blah blah blah. What are you doing? Whatever. But one of the criteria was just he who. Like how delightfully how delightfully shitty do you feel? That's sort of like, does it make you like a giggle by just being a gross little guy, right? And I immediately latched on to and I sent this was when we were working on DDR. This was before we started doing anything, actually, because we were still finishing on DDR. And I shared that in like whatever the social channel or water cooler or whatever it was called, and we both thought it was funny. The he who thing I immediately latched onto, and I said like, oh man, that is that would be an incredible design pillar for a game, just building a game around that concept. And honestly, I think when we started iterating on Welcome Archer, and we got the idea of goblins didn't come right away, but it was definitely like floating around in our conversations from the beginning. As much as armored head, I think he who was like really part of the initial seed of the idea.
Yeah, very much so. And what's interesting to me there is, even though it seems so, I don't know, it may seem so like, oh, that's obviously this direction. We had spoken about different ways you could like evoke the sense of he who, like it, because Welcome Archer is a slower game. You have this like stamina system, so you can't do too much at once. You kind of move slower, you sneak around, and like when we were thinking about it at the time, the he who could come from like stealing something and like quietly sneaking away with it, or dropping a bomb on an unsuspecting enemy, or doing these like mischievous, naughty, nasty things, but a little bit secretively, a little bit like in the shadows. And ultimately, the direction we took is way more like you described with the punk band, like much louder, much more of like a. It's he who, not by sneakily dropping the bomb at you. It's looking you in the eyes in slow-mo while mid-air and throwing out a bomb and a giggle at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm proud of that. That's great. Yep. This is basically a podcast. now?
Oh yeah,
Like a one-off podcast of how we did the game. These are great questions.
these are
like
super
when I
good.
read this. Yeah, when I read the list, I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun.
Do we have a name for our gladiator?
This is such an interesting question. Do we have a name for the gladiator? I never considered a name. That is so... And now that I read the question, I'm like, man, that's crazy that we never named the gladiator. It's really just like the gladiator.
It is the gladiator.
Or the goblin.
I mean, it's like... One thing that we had considered is playing as different goblins. It wasn't always necessarily just like, oh, you play one character the whole time. And I don't know if that's still true or not. Like, are you just the same character the whole time? Are you a new goblin gladiator every time? It's still kind of like an open question.
It is man, that was such a cool idea. That was one of those ideas. I talk about it in the devlog, which I'll send you a rough cut today. I talk about it that like we don't want to be working on games. We don't want to be working on any one game forever, and so we're pretty quick. Certainly relative to any other team that I've ever worked with, and I've been doing this for enough time now that I've seen a lot of teams. We are the quickest to cut stuff. The multiple goblin idea. Oh, I mean, we also cut it because it was complicated and we could simplify it, but like that idea is actually cool. Like having the whole like gladiator school and having goblins that have different strengths and stuff like that. It's obviously a much bigger project at that point. But there is something to that idea. I totally forgot about that idea. That's great. I think in like my own head, yes, you're playing as the same gladiator. That you're like you die in the arena, and like when you die in the arena, air quotes die, you like basically fall apart like some weird Jim Henson muscle or something like that. Just like your arm goes this, and it's not gory or anything. It's just like, yeah, they sometimes come apart, man. I don't know. And then I don't know, someone collects all your pieces and you get snapped back together or whatever. That's sort of how I think of it in my head. But obviously there's nothing in the game that talks about it, right? You just die and then you're back at the homestead.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
yeah, it's probably up for everyone to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you die. So the text at the end of...
Oh yeah, I guess we do knockout.
Yeah, exactly. The text at the end of the Welcome Archer game says slain. Is like, oh, you didn't make it, you died. And when I changed that to say knockout for Gobsmacked, it immediately felt like more of like, oh, this is its own game now. This is like a different thing. Yeah.
Oh wait, the question was about a name.
Oh, we're gonna do this a lot.
We're either really good at this or really bad at this. I don't know. So yeah, I guess no name. It's one of those things like having places for the player to come up with their own stuff. It invites collaboration almost with the player.
Might be too early to start with the theories, but between the theme of the game, the shop area with the huge statue in the middle, and the map of your journey within Gobsmacked, that kind of aligns with Italy's lakes, Trasimeno, Bolsena, and Bracciano, is it safe to assume this game takes place in Italy? Or, well, some dystopian version of it where it was captured by the goblins. Future Kalo here. Yes, I know the map shows the literal Colosseo Romano. It completely went over my head, but somehow I spotted those 3 lakes. So yeah, we could say that I failed successfully. Now back to the video.
Oh, good. We talked about this on Twitter in DM. Good eye noticing.
So good. Oh my gosh.
I'm so happy that you noticed. Although we have to redo them, so we added all the new arenas to ease the difficulty curve, and now it doesn't fit on the map anymore. And so I know every time I make a change to this, it's you have to actually do the work to lay stuff out. But I think I've been thinking in a month or so of doing one final layout, probably zooming in on the map a little bit, but I'd still love it if we could end up in Rome.
Yeah, I'd love to do that as well.
Because right now, the icon of the icon for the final arena is the Colosseum.
And I think I watched one streamer play, and they were like, "I think I'm in Italy," I think that's the real Colosseum.
Oh, for real?
I think they got it.
Yeah, so it's your last sentence, some dystopian version where it's captured by the goblins. This is a post-humans Earth. Like, humans, I don't know, they get in their rocket ships and they like fly off. They realize like, hey, we kind of messed up Earth. Let's just leave. Let's do something else. And before they leave, though, they have like a huge party. The way Ash, this was your line, but it's stuck in my head for the last year. That think of what a house looks like after a house party, the morning after a house party, right? That's what Earth is now. It is the morning after a house party. And I don't know where we've never actually talked about where the goblins come from. It's just like, this is the life that took over. At least in Italy. I don't think it's global, but I don't know, maybe they are. Maybe they're all over the place. I have no idea. But at least in Italy. So these are Italian goblins.
Man, that kind of elevates them somehow. They're like slightly more classy in my head after this conversation than before.
They're really good leather workers. They're very good. They can make beautiful cars. It's just really...
It explains the craftsmanship and all these cool weapons you've been designing.
Hey! Oh my, it kind of does! Oh, wow.
They like come in with a normal janky looking bow, and then the one goblin's like, no. This needs... this is lacking.
Oh, I love it. I don't know if that's actually canon, but it's pretty fun.
It's pretty cool.
It might be.
What would you say is your favorite part of working on Gobsmacked? And the least?
I mean, at a bigger scale, it's definitely been like working together, the two of us.
Yeah, that's actually what just
and
popped in my head.
Like for various reasons, I think like one of the things is like you mentioned how quickly we work through things, so it very rarely feels stale for me. Like every day we can either like talk through something and go a completely different direction with something, and that feels really cool. I've worked on stuff before solo and I kind of get stuck and I'm like, how do I solve this problem, and like what is the right approach here? And often what will happen with working with Adam is he'll be like, no, that like let's do this instead, and that, you know, ends up in a conversation where we actually do something else. But like I very rarely have felt stuck. And when you're unstuck and having a good time with the person who's like keeping the project unstuck and seeing stuff move quickly, that's like super exciting for me.
Okay. What's the favorite part of working on Gobsmacked? And the least? That's a good question. You go first. I have to think about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. And honestly, like the part I like least, it's honestly not related to the game at all. It's that I'm having to juggle other stuff. Like I teach, and I love teaching, and teaching is what pays the bills, but the fact that I have to that I don't get to spend as much time on the game as I want to, at least like during the school year, that's really the only negative part. Like this project has, you know, you and I've said to each other a number of times, like, man, this is just like, what a treat. Like we are, how lucky are we that we get to like make this thing together?
You know, and I think even that, like, you juggling multiple things with your time, it helps to have time away from the thing you're working on.
Yeah.
In this, like,
that's probably
true. Time not necessarily at the keyboard looking at the things to get done, because you'll often have, like, a fresher perspective when we chat about something, like, a day or two later. And that's always, like, super useful. So, I don't know. It's... It's like not exactly a formula you can replicate, but it's all kind of working. At least it feels that way from my perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the least exciting part is just doing some of the things that kind of need to be done in making a game, and I guess any product. It's like the settings and getting sure the controls are like rebindable and making sure that it can be translated into multiple languages. Like all of these things are important to me in a product. They're just not particularly exciting to work on, like relative to the like prototyping, gameplay, and like wiring up new art and stuff like that.
Art has versions of that too, but they're not nearly as my unexciting things are still more exciting than your.
What is an unexciting art task? Is it like redoing some items so that they're more consistent? Like, what is the typical unexciting art task?
No, it's for me at this point in my career, right? Having made games for as long as I have, some of the just like low level production stuff can feel sort of rote and like, yeah, okay, time to do. Like, I still enjoy everything to some level, but it's also a lot of it is work that I can do like half asleep and, you know, juggling other things in the day. And whenever you have something that you can do half asleep, it means like, yeah, it's not the most engaging thing. It just sort of needs to get done.
Yeah.
There's actually like not that I've had to do this for some time, but like if we make a new structure or a new ground plate or so basically just so you understand like the components of the environment. Whenever we block one out, the process of taking the block out and doing the production on it, where like, okay, I've got to set the ledges to be exactly like 0.5 units you know, down, and like everything, we have this system of measurements that everything needs to use so it's all consistent. And then like doing the UVs for them and stuff like that. It doesn't take a long time. Like you know, you can, if it's a small arena, I can do the production work in about, I don't know, 60 minutes, probably not more than that. So it's not a ton of work, but it's one of those things that going in, you know, it's going to feel tedious. So it has a sort of unenthusiastic gravity to it before you start, where it's just like, okay, I'm just going to get it done. And I'll like usually put on a documentary or a movie or something like that and just push through.
That's so funny, because like a task like that's so unexciting for you. I would like wake up the next morning, because for context, like we work in different time zones. I'm in Europe and Adam's in the States, and I like wake up in the morning and I'll like pull from Git, and it's like, oh, there's new shit from Adam here, and that's kind of delighting way to start the day. That like, oh, there was an arena before that looked just like gray boxes, and now it looks like real art. It's like, oh, it's a game now. So yeah.
I mean, like that is, I think, that thought is always in my head, that like, you know, with just two of us on this thing, like, here is what I can do to make the game better, you know, and you know, I think the flip side is like we've been doing weapon changes over this past week, and it never, like, you do stuff in like 5 minutes, but it can potentially radically change the way something feels. And I like, if you said to me, hey, go like tweak these values or whatever, I'd be like, I don't know where they are. That's not my job. Like, I have no idea how to do that. But you can do it really quick, and then it's like, oh my god, the game is so much more fun. That's so cool. You know, so I think with like adding icons or doing the, you know, environment work or like whatever, all of those little things, that's how I can give you that experience, right? So it's always, it's at very least, you know, that you're doing sort of an act of kindness for in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking now about, you know, even these design changes and like the weapon, you know, value tweaks over the last week. There's something really interesting about that, where you not having your like hands on the controls and knowing all of the values has really been valuable for us, like collaborating, because you kind of, I mean, you still played the game a bunch, you know how things are, you're expecting them to feel, you know what feels frustrating, you know, and you can tell when something has been changed, if it feels better and worse, or how it feels different. So having that's also been like a good dynamic with us, that like one of us has their like finger on the pulse on either the art production or like the game design, like literal values, but the other person is still seeing those things just from like a kind of distance, and they can kind of give super valuable feedback. But it's not like, hey, change this number to 20% instead of 10. It's more just like, oh, this definitely needs to be higher, but not too much higher.
Yeah, we can each talk about each other's domains from almost more from a pure player perspective. Like, this doesn't feel right. And you and I both have like done enough work and have enough respect for each other where we never say, I maybe do actually, and I apologize if I ever do this. I try not to say like, I think it needs to be like, it's never a demand. It's usually like a, listen, this is how it feels. I don't know how to fix this, but like, take that information and make whatever change you feel is appropriate. Right?
So maybe
which I think that's a way healthier way.
Yeah, maybe to like help with understanding this, like for the actual context, one of the things we worked on this week was the blades. So in Gobsmacked, you have these like, you have a weapon which is these blades you can throw, and one of the two of the distinguishing things about these blades are that they're kind of like long and flat, so they're a different kind of projectile, and they don't have any drop. You can throw them real far. And the second thing is that they bounce. Like, you can upgrade other weapons to also have a bounce, but the blades kind of start with a bounce. And it was cool, like those ideas like theoretically are cool, but they just weren't quite gelling in the way we wanted. And we kept having this back and forth about like how to improve them, or do we need to like think of them differently or redo them as a weapon. And through like a bunch of conversations, the ultimate tweak we decided on was, oh, what should actually happen is that if it bounces and it's kind of going to hit an enemy anyway, it's like sort of going at that angle, it can do a little bit of homing at the end and hit the enemy. And suddenly, like, not a very big change has made the blades feel so much cooler, because now you can throw them and bounce them off the wall, and there's like a 90% chance they're going to hit the enemy, versus like a much smaller chance before when they had like purely, you know, accurate physically simulated physics.
You know, it's similar to, you know, the slow-mo when you aim used to be like an upgrade you can purchase, but then we made it just a thing that was on all the time. And the reason for that was, it is actually really, if you're just moving at normal speed, it's really hard to be moving and firing and hitting stuff in Gobsmacked, but by slowing down, it feels like a cool movie moment, and then you're able to pull off these really cool trick shots where you're like falling through the air and shooting a guy as you go past, and it just makes you feel cool. It makes you feel like a gladiator. And I think the fact that we artificially, and players will never know this, right? That I mean, you and anyone else who actually knows this information, but like the fact that we nudge the angle on the blades a little bit after a bounce, it makes it way more likely that you're able to pull off these trick shots, and where you're like, oh, I see a guy I can see the outline of a guy on the other side of the wall, but I'm gonna like ricochet a blade off and get him, and that feels really good, right? That makes you feel like a gladiator, and it's way more important that players feel like a gladiator than angles on projectiles are truly
accurate,
honest and accurate.
And I mean, it is balanced with some skill. Like it's just nudging it, so it's not like you can just throw the blade anywhere and it's going to bounce and hit something. You kind of have to be pretty close anyway.
You have to be close. Yeah.
But damn, does it feel good when you hit it?
Dude, last night, when I was playing, I should have been recording. It was such a good shot. I had blades. So, by the way, we've been saying blades just to make sure you understand. It's like a big saw blade, right? Think of like a big circular saw blade. That's the type of thing. It's not like you're throwing machetes or something. So I had blades, and I had more stacked a couple of times. And for context, more is an upgrade that, you know, when you use your weapon, you send out more than one projectile, and you can keep stacking it up. So I was sending out maybe 5 blades at a time, but I threw a bunch at some guys like way up on the upper parts of a structure, and a few of the blades hit like parts of the structure and broke them, but then 2 of them bounced and hit guys on like the other opposite side of the wall, like 2 at the same time.
So good.
And it was just like such a cool, like, oh man, that was like everything on the top of that structure and those guys just like got disintegrated by the blades, sort of like a rocket. And it had the same, I had the same experience last night as I did the first time we had the destructible structures in there, and I shot a rocket and I saw all the pieces go everywhere. Like, oh, that felt so, like, what a change I just made. I had the experience last night with the blades. I was like, oh, the blades feel so good.
So good. Yeah.
Do you guys have any final thoughts you'd like to share regarding the development of Gobsmacked?
I think my only thought is I still feel like a dummy for not hitting record when I told you to hit record. I can't believe I did that.
It's reflecting poorly on the entire development of the game. Oh man. Yeah. I think a big thing for me with Gobsmacked has been this dance of like creating the thing that's very much in your head that you set out to make, like making your vision, and also listening to the game that is like screaming at you to say what it wants to be. And sometimes that screaming is really loud and obnoxious, but sometimes it's quite subtle and it's just very quietly whispering like what it wants to be, and you have to listen quite carefully. But yeah, the whole process has been like a really good exercise in that for me. And it's also been very fun to work with you on that stuff, Adam, because I think you have a good ear for that stuff. You're pretty good at saying like, oh, I think the game, and you literally put stuff sometimes. You say like, the game wants to be this, or I think the game wants to be this. And that's like a really cool way to see it.
Yeah. I mean, hell, I think we could probably... That's like a panel discussion right there. Like, you could easily fill 60 minutes just talking on that topic if you had like a handful of, you know, developers or something. That sense of like, you don't want to... You know, it's sort of, the game itself becomes just another person that you're collaborating with, right? Like, if you approach making something as like some like auteur and everything has to be your way or the highway, you're ultimately, it's going to end up in, and this is subjective, but like, I think it's going to end up in a worse spot because everybody has blind spots, and you're not going to be able to like think of everything. And sometimes just like someone else being able to share their perspective, it's like, oh, I never would have thought about it like that. But that is a lot better. I realized that was just like this whole thing I was not considering. And you and I do that for each other all the time, but the game does it too, right? That, and it's emergent, right? It's, oh, this element X is now situated next to element Y. And I was never thinking of those two things together. But now that they're on screen together at the same time, I'm thinking about the product differently. I'm thinking about the experience differently. And you just have to be like cognizant of that. And you have to be open to that.
Having the game be like this person you're collaborating with is such a good analogy, because in the early phases of the game, the collaborator is kind of like a little baby or a toddler. Like, it's saying stuff, but it's not, you don't like, what? You just made a noise. What is that? Are you hungry? Are you enjoying yourself? Like, what's going on? You still alive? But as it gets like more fully formed, like as the project matures and the game becomes like more of its own thing, like there is a clearer communication, and it's like clearer to see like which directions and path to take. It's a really cool analogy.
Yeah. It's, and you're absolutely right? It evolves over time. You have to use a much heavier hand, I think, early on. Like, you are the taste. I guess you're always the tastemaker. But there's so much foundational work that you have to do. Like, okay, let's make the thing we talked about making. right? And once you do that, you can sort of step back and look at it and be like, okay, there was the thing we were trying to make, but then there is the thing that we made, and it's not necessarily the same thing, right? And now that we're looking at the thing we made, it gets back to that emergent stuff. What ideas do we have? And that's when I think, for me anyway, that's when you have to really start listening to the thing. Yeah. Hey, that was what a good note to end on.
Yeah, great note to end on.
Like, what a good topic to end on. That
feels
good.
Great questions.
Thank you again so much. Yeah, great questions. I'll go back and re-record all of my stuff as best I can. And yeah, can't wait for the video. The other one that we watched, like Ash and I were both like, oh, this is awesome.
That's super cool.
I hope you guys like this interview. I wasn't expecting that they would record their own lines and share so much of their life with us, but I'm glad that they did. A big part of why I like to do these videos is because I want to hear about the stories of the small developers such as these. Juggling your daily duties with those bits of free time to work on your passion projects, it's never easy. Especially when you work a 9 to 5 and by the time you get home you just want to rest. But as long as you keep on moving, one little step at a time, you are definitely on the right track. Thank you Adam and Ash for taking the time to answer my questions, and thank you guys for watching this video. If you liked it, please don't forget to leave a comment, a like, and if possible subscribe. Until the next episode, stay frosty!